Today is 1 Samuel chapter 31, the last chapter of 1 Samuel. Title of the message today is Face the Music. You ever had to face the music before? Maybe they say, getting called out onto the carpet, something like that. Today's the day. Now I'm going to share with you one of my favorite stories. I do this at work all the time. Two men worked on a large ocean-going vessel. One day, the mate, who normally did not drink, became intoxicated. The captain, who hated him, entered in the daily log, "Mate drunk today." He knew this was his first offense, but he wanted to get him fired. The mate was aware of his evil intent and begged him to change the record. The captain, however, replied, "It's a fact." And in the log it goes. A few days later, the mate was keeping the log, and you'll never guess what he entered into the log. "Captain, sober today." Realizing the implication of the statement, the captain asked for it to be removed. And in reply, the mate said, "It's a fact, and it's staying in the log." Things happen for a reason. Sometimes things end up in a logbook and stay there forever. Sometimes we mess up and we have to face those consequences. It's often said that sometimes the reason things go bad is because you're an idiot and you robbed a bank and end up in jail. Don't do that. Sometimes bad things happen because God is putting you through some sort of a test or some sort of trial. As we come to chapter 31 today, we're going to ask questions like, what happened? Why does it end like this? What is the conclusion of these matters? How long is God going to allow Saul to be king? And how is this all going to end? What are the facts of this going to end up being? They're going to be recorded into this log. We're going to try to answer some of those questions today in the last chapter of 1 Samuel. There's only 13 verses. But today, God wants you to see the aftermath of Saul's reign. There's 3 stages to the aftermath of Saul's reign. Verses 1 through 6, the ruthlessness of battle. Saul dies. The second stage, verses 7 through 10, the result of bandits. Cities are destroyed. The third stage, verses 11 through 13, the reaction of bonds. Bodies are delivered. So let's read verses 1 through 6, the ruthlessness of battle. As we've been doing 1 Samuel for the last several weeks, we've had these stories that have kind of bobbled and weaved as we've been anticipating this climactic battle between Israel and the Philistines. As you remember, David was supposed to be with Achish in the midst of this battle. They've been setting up camps. They've been getting ready to go. Saul consulted a medium to try to resurrect Samuel in that weird seance we looked at several weeks ago as he's trying to prepare for this very battle. As we think about how much time has passed when David was on the run, 7 to 10 years, the last several chapters have been about one day. They're getting ready for battle. This is like the 10th battle since we resurrected Samuel. This is that climactic battle that we've been preparing for weeks now. It's here. This battle is upon us. Verse 1. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. The battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. And then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell on it. And when his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword, and he died with him. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all his men died together that same day. The ruthlessness of battle. Saul dies. So what is the conclusion of the life of Saul? We've seen Saul become the anointed king of Israel. How many weeks ago was that? When Samuel came and anointed him as king. This chicken of a guy who fled from the presence of the prophet as he was about to be anointed king. And we've seen him grow and develop and see what he's done. We've seen the decisions that he's made. We've seen what's happened. We've seen his activity. We've seen his faithfulness. And of course, we've seen a lot more of his faithlessness. Was Saul a good pick for king? Was Saul everything that God wanted him to be? Did Saul fulfill all of the stuff that God had in mind for him? I don't know. It's a tragic end to a tragic reign. If he would have done what God wanted him to do, would he have lived longer? Would he have survived this battle? Would he have won the battle? I don't know. But this was time for Saul to face the music. This battle was going to be the last one. God told him through the prophet Samuel in that aforementioned seance that your time is coming to a close and we're going to just wrap this up real quick with you. God was not very happy with him calling up Samuel from the dead. Wasn't excited about that. And so we come to this battle. The Philistines followed hard. They killed Jonathan, Abinadab, Melchishua, Saul's sons. They didn't kill all of Saul's sons. Did you realize that? There's another son. Do you know what his name is? Bonus points if next Sunday you come and you tell me what the other son's name is. Bonus points. But it's kind of like whose line is it anywhere? The points don't matter. But nevertheless, I will award them out. If you can tell me the name of Saul's other son that survives and actually does something. And David invites him into the court. There's a whole story about it. But he doesn't die here. The battle became fierce. Archers hit him. So this is what happens to Saul. This is how he dies. He's in the midst of battle. Some archer of the Philistines shot an arrow and hit him. Didn't kill him though, but severely wounded him. And he realizes that the end is near. So he tells his armor bearer to kill him. Why? It's kind of like if you know you've been had and you want to take a cyanide pill or something. You've seen this probably in movies or something. And so he tells his armor bearer to kill him. Just thrust me right through. I don't want these, he calls them these uncircumcised men, to collect him and abuse him or torture him or somehow do something with him that's not cool. The Philistines have had a long storied history of abusing people like this. As you recall in the book of Judges, they would poke out eyes and stuff like that. So he didn't want to be mistreated like this. So he tells his armor bearer to just kill me, just take me out. And his armor bearer says what? No, I cannot do that. You got to admire this armor bearer. He kind of had the mind like David did. I cannot take out the Lord's anointed. It doesn't matter if you've been shot with an arrow. It doesn't matter if we've come to the end. It doesn't matter if God says that this is the final climactic one. I will not kill you because you are the Lord's anointed. And so Saul, therefore, now has to take his own sword and he has to fall on his own sword. And how does Saul finally die? Suicide. This champion, the one who could do no evil, who had an excuse for everything, and knew more than anybody else. Just ask him. He'll tell you what we need to do. Saul, did you kill all the Amalekites? I sure did. I even kept the best of the best. Just ask him. He's got it all figured out. This guy, how does he die? Suicide. How many of you had that on your bingo card? As you think about how is Saul going to die, you think old age. Maybe he would have died in battle, properly. Something. A disease, maybe. Maybe he was assassinated. Nope. Suicide. It's a pretty ruthless battle. and he put himself there. I suspect that if he would have done what God wanted him to do, that battle would not have ended that way. And sometimes some of us end up in really bad situations where we have to face the music because we have done some dumb things or have acted wickedly or did something we shouldn't have done or something we knew we shouldn't have done or something like that, or went someplace we shouldn't have gone, and now we find ourselves in a heap of trouble. And we do things that we're not supposed to do. Saul has to face the music here. He dies in battle. So what's the result of this? So he dies, and so what's going to happen? Verses 7 through 10. Then when the men of Israel, who were on the other side of the valley, and those who were on the other side of the Jordan, saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled, and the Philistines came and dwelt in them. Now it happened the next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, that they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head, stripped off his armor, and sent word through the land of the Philistines to proclaim it in the temple of their idols and among the people. Then they put his armor in the temple of the Ashtaroths, and they fastened his body to the wall of Beth Shan. So this is the result of these bandits now that have come through, and now are going to destroy these cities. It wasn't just enough that Saul and his sons are going to die. The Philistines now are going to ransack these cities. So these men of Israel, who when they realize that Saul and his sons are dead, they fled. They get out of there. You know, when you cut the head of the snake off, it just really starts to go sour. These guys fled. They got out of there. Their leader's gone. Saul's dead. The sons are gone. And they run for their lives, and they get out of there. And when the Philistines are coming upon these cities as they're continuing to take this territory in the midst of this battle, and they realize that these cities have now been disbanded, they go in and they now get into there. And they're going to dwell in them. They're going to take these cities as their own. I don't know who the next king's going to be. But he's going to have his work cut out for him, isn't he? Because now we have these cities which were once held by Israel are now being held by the Philistines. And you talk about being behind the 8 ball. And there's no way who's ever going to be king next is ever going to be able to dig out of this hole. There's no way that the next guy is going to be able to handle this. What do you think? Of course, we know the answer to that story. We know who the next king's going to be. And we know what he's going to do. And I don't think this is going to be a problem. But for the time it is, these Philistines are showing how savage they truly are in the midst of this battle when they take out these cities, they dwell in them. Who knows what they've done with anybody that stayed behind? They're going to take the body of Saul. They're going to cut off his head and strip off his armor. He was very correct in worrying about the fact that if he would have been taken alive, what they would have done to him. Because taken dead, they're already cutting off his head and hanging his armor and his body up. What would they have done to him alive? Crazy. Cities are destroyed. The Philistines have come in and wreaked havoc over the land. Because the leader's gone, Saul's dead, and this is just unraveling faster than you can pull out a stitch from a sweater. You ever try to do that? It's just coming right out. That's what's happening to Israel right now. As a result of the wickedness of Saul, his missteps, his misfortune, his unfaithful deeds, his delinquent behavior, his unfaithfulness to the Lord, all the other issues and problems that he's had has resulted in the fact that these problems from the Philistines are now compounding onto the people in these cities. So here's the principle that we need to think about. When you do something that you're not supposed to do, like Saul in this instance, maybe you can claim the seance as the culprit, maybe not killing the Amalekites like he's supposed to, whatever you want to say, pick your favorite. When you do stuff like Saul is doing, the sin that you incur doesn't just end with you. It's awful tough to sin in a vacuum. Have you ever noticed that? When you do something you're not supposed to do, it affects other people. So as I was thinking about this, I always think about, remember in Joshua, the story of Achan? He was not supposed to take from the spoils of the battle, and he did, and he hid it under his bed. So Joshua had to go through and clean it out. His sin was affecting the entire camp. It's tough to sin in a vacuum. It's tough to do it all by yourself. We're so interconnected as people. We were designed to be so interconnected and interwoven with people that anything bad or sinful that you do will affect other people. But here's the good news. If you do stuff that's good, though, that can affect other people too. So which way are you trying to go in life? Are you the kind of person that's like a Saul who is kind of like the moldy apple and it gets put in with the rest of the apples and now all the apples are moldy? I bet you know somebody like that. I just hope it's not you. Or are you the kind of person that does what they're supposed to do, who's following after the Lord, who's faithful, who's doing the right things, making the right choices, following after the Lord, doing those good and faithful works? And so that when you get around somebody and you get around people, they're starting to pick up on your good habits, making better decisions. They stop cursing when you're around. They stop saying the bad things when you're around because they know better that you're here. And so we're now going to clean up our act. So a wonderful feeling when somebody around you stops doing that kind of nonsense because you're present. It's God working through you in a way to try to convince other people and convict other people that what they're doing is not okay. And you can show them a better way. You don't have to be the Saul in everybody's life. You can be somebody who's able to show them a good and better way. Because I tell you what, it sucks to face the music like this. Saul's having to take this, and he's taking it really hard. He dies. The cities are ransacked. The cities are destroyed. These bandits have come and taken over everything. But there is some good news. You've probably read these last few verses. Verses 11 through 13. Now when the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and traveled all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Beth-shan and came to Jabesh and burned them there. Then they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree of Jabesh and fasted 7 days. Does that mean anything to you? I'll still remember for the rest of my life the first time I read this and it didn't resonate with me. What is so important, what is so significant about those last 3 verses? Do any of these names sound familiar? Think back to when Saul was first anointed. His very first thing that he did, the very first group of people that he went to go rescue. Do you remember who that was? It was the people of Jabesh-Gilead. They were going to have their eyes plucked out. They were going to be captured. Their cities were going to be destroyed. These people were going to be taken. And Saul is freshly anointed. He's supposed to be the guy. And he goes, and his first act that he could actually do something with his life in an official capacity like this, he goes in and he gets the word out, and all these people come together, and he comes to Jabesh-Gilead. He wipes those guys out. He saves the day for the people of Jabesh-Gilead. And how long ago was that? Probably 7 to 10 years ago. You know, ever since David's been on the run, at least if not longer ago. And they've probably been watching the show. They've been watching what's going on. They're getting on Facebook and they're seeing all the nasty things that Saul has done. And, they're making their phone calls and, they're talking about how boy, Saul's messed up again and Samuel can't stand him anymore, and on it goes. We all read the same newspapers. For the last 10 years, Jabesh-Gilead has had to read this about Saul. How do you suppose they have felt about all this negative publicity about Saul? They probably can't stand it. When you have somebody that stood up for you in a way like this, rescued your family, saved you from destruction, saved you from getting destroyed, saved you from being taken captive, you kept your eyesight in the midst of the whole thing, and this guy is the one who rescued you. I don't know that he could have done a wrong thing for the rest of his life, as far as they're concerned. Because in spite of all the nonsense that this guy has done, and we can go through it, and we have been through it. All 31 chapters of this book we've been through. We've read every word. We know what he's been up to. We know what kind of guy this has been. We know the tricks that he's pulled, and we know what kind of nonsense he's been up to. And so do the people of Jabesh-Gilead. And in the end, when he's dead, he's been captured, his head's been cut off, they've put him into the temple with their Ashtaroths, and they've desecrated his body, and they've done some really nasty things to him. Who is it that comes to save the day for him now that he's been killed? The people of Jabesh-Gilead. I mean, you want to talk about loyalty, service, remembrance, faithfulness. These guys are the ones that we need to be thinking about as we think about those qualities. The reaction of these bonds is fantastic. They have not forgotten everything that he's done for them. That's service. That's quality. That's faithfulness. And they were really good about doing this for Saul. The valiant men, they traveled all night. The danger that this would have required, I don't know how they did it. God had to have done some sort of miracle for them to be able to get in unscathed, to be able to get in, get this body, get it out of this temple of the Ashtaroths. They fastened his body to the wall. They would have to get it out of there undetected, unscathed, and get it back home. And unbelievable what these guys were able to do. And they burned his body. I don't know if they did that because that's what they do with Darth Vader. Why is that funny? Because they didn't know anything about Darth Vader. But that's what they did. They burned his body. They took the bones and buried them. So what's going on here? What has happened? Don't you just wish that there was some sort of conclusion to this matter? Because it still seems a little open-ended. And you know that 1st, 2nd Chronicles kind of gives like an overcap of 1st, 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. Does a bit of an overcap, a review, if you will. Kind of reading it through twice if you go through all 6 of these books. And so if you go into 1 Chronicles chapter 10, we're going to get a God's eye view of what happened here. 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verses 13 and 14. This is why Saul died. Saul died for his unfaithfulness, which he had committed against the Lord, because he did not keep the word of the Lord, and also because he consulted a medium for guidance. But he did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore, God killed him and turned over the kingdom to David, the son of Jesse. Why did God allow these things to happen? Why did God let this happen? Why? Well, he tells us in 1 Chronicles chapter 10, his unfaithfulness. as we think about the kings of Israel, Saul of which is the first official one. Then we go to David, and who's after David? Anybody? Who's after David? Solomon. And then the kingdom splits. And we get Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Rehoboam in the southern 2 tribes, Jeroboam in the 10 northern tribes. The two southern tribes, they will continue with the line of David. The 10 northern tribes, they're going to just be all over the place. And every one of those kings is going to be evil. The ones in the southern tribe, the line of David, some of them are good and some of them are not so good. And in every case, every king is going to be evaluated. But they're not evaluated based upon their ability to make money. They're not evaluated based upon how much education they got. They're not evaluated based on how many times they went to church. They're not that's not the evaluation that God gives these guys. Every one of them is going to get evaluated, though. The evaluation is based on their ability to keep covenant. Saul was no exception. How was Saul judged according to God for his time as king? He is viewed as unfaithful. He did not keep the word of the Lord. He consulted a medium for guidance. He did not inquire of the Lord. He did not keep covenant, guys. This is his problem. God told him, I want you to do this, 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 and this, and you didn't do it. Therefore, it's over. And I'm taking the kingdom from you. I'm giving it to David. And this is the way we're going to go. It's time to face the music, Solomon. Sometimes when we face the music, we end up in jail. Sometimes when we face the music, we lose our job. Sometimes when we face the music, certain things can happen. But we really don't like it when people die when we have to face the music. That seems a little extreme to us. But when Saul had to face the music, in the very end here, at the end of what is his life, him facing the music included his death. Because God was done with him. As you think about the evaluation of your life, you're not going to be evaluated on how much money you gave at church. You're not going to be evaluated on whether or not you did this or you did that or whatever. You're going to get asked some really simple questions in the end. Primarily about Jesus. Did you accept Jesus? Did you trust in Jesus? Is Jesus the author and finisher of your faith? Is Jesus the one to whom you've placed your trust? Have you placed your faith in Jesus? Have you accepted the mercy that God has given to you through the death of Jesus Christ? These are the kinds of things that you're going to get asked when you face the music one day when you stand before God. Are you ready for that? It could happen to any of us at any time. There's no magic button that tells you when your number is going to get drawn. And for many of us, we will have said that we accepted Jesus at some point in our lives. Jesus was it for us at some point in our lives. And we give the big thumbs up and yeah, I'm all in on Jesus, you bet. It's been 15 years now. It's been 20 years now. Maybe it's been 5 years. And I ask you about your walk with the Lord or something like that, and there's no walk, and there's, I'm going to ask you, why would you give that up? Why did you give up Jesus? Did you find something better? Did you find something that was better than Jesus? Did you find something easier than Jesus? Did you find something that was more complete than Jesus? Is there something out there that's better than Jesus, guys? But yet there's plenty of people who have walked away from Jesus, and there's nothing better. Saul walked away from his commitments. He walked away from God. He walked away from all this stuff and was completely unfaithful in his life, and God punished him for it by killing him here in this battle. Next week, we're going to start Hebrews. And we're going to be thinking about the fact that Jesus is better than anything else out there. And as we get into the introduction next week, I want you guys to think about, is there something better than Jesus out there? And we're going to try to find something. We're going to look real hard, aren't we? You just only have to talk to a couple people who once accepted Jesus and who no longer come to church and who no longer pray. Ask them, what did they find that's better? Because I see you're not doing these things anymore like you used to. What's better? What's more fulfilling than Jesus? We're going to start that next week. Let's pray.